One of the determinations of our success as instructional designers or anyone in the education industry is not how we teach, but rather the extent to which our students learn. This short session covers intentional facilitation in instructional design and specific questions you can consider in order to choose the most effective implementation strategy. One of my favorite learning quotes is, "Teaching without learning is just talking. How you deliver information to your audience or audiences is just as important as the content itself." Educators often focus too much on the content of the information that is provided and too little on the process through which adults can be engaged and motivated to adopt new practices or make changes in their behavior. In the best case scenario, the learner didn't even realize it was the instructor or facilitator that was helping them learn. Today we'll talk about why information delivery is just as important as the content itself. Take a moment and think about how this impacts us as professionals in the educational field. Pause and think about the following questions for a moment before continuing. There are 4 questions I want you to consider. First, when you think of the occupation of a teacher, what comes to mind? At what moment is your primary focus on the educator? What about the learner? Explain why educators and researchers suggest a person is not teaching if no learning is taking place. Would it be possible to win a teaching award if students were not learning? Why or why not? And what do you see as the peak moment when you're facilitating learning? That is, what brings you the greatest joy as an educator or instructional designer? The first topic we're going to talk about today is facilitated learning in instructional design. The first consideration is the importance. How information is delivered to the learner is just as important as the content itself. We need to consider our delivery up front and be intentional about those methods. Also, we have the wrong focus sometimes. There's too much focus on the content and too little focus on the process through which learners will engage with learning, adopt new practices, and change their behavior. What strategies are we using? What is the difference between facilitating learning versus simply delivering information or teaching? And what strategies are we using? Last is, when should content be delivered versus when should it be facilitated? We're going to talk through each of these throughout the remainder of the presentation. There are 6 advantages to facilitated learning. The first is that it engages the learner in their own learning and gives them responsibility for successful learning outcomes. It also focuses on relevant, real-life issues and practical solutions. It identifies alternative solutions and shows consequences and outcomes of the decisions the learners are making. It elevates the status of the learner to contribute to the learning process. It allows the facilitator to provide meaningful learning to affect the learner's day-to-day work. And it empowers the learner to use the information to improve, whether they're changing their behavior, their motivation, or something else. Have you ever heard of backwards design? Some of you probably have and others probably haven't. If this is a topic you're interested in learning more about, drop a comment below and I will gauge interest for a standalone session covering backwards design. There are essentially 3 steps in backwards design. Step 1 is to identify the desired outcomes for the learner and create a purpose statement, objectives, etc. We are thinking about the end first. Step 2 is to determine how learning will be assessed. We're trying to align our desired learning outcomes with how we are assessing if learning actually happened. And step 3 is to select a teaching strategy. How am I going to facilitate learning? How am I going to get them to achieve those objectives and be able to be assessed on what we wanted them to achieve? Ultimately, backwards design tries to get you to think about the end first and then think about the beginning. We're thinking about what we want them to be able to do at the end of it so we can help craft our instruction to meet those learning needs. Once again, I want you to pause the video for a couple minutes, think about the question on the screen, and write your answers on a blank piece of paper. Now that you've wrote your own thoughts down, we're actually going to talk about the difference between teaching and facilitating. Then at the end, you can compare your notes and see if you've changed your perception. Teaching and facilitating are not mutually exclusive processes. Both teaching and facilitating are effective instructional strategies. However, each is appropriate for particular educational objectives and scenarios. Instructors who are able to apply both methods strategically and effectively can realize greater successes in delivering information and empowering their audience. I want you to take a moment and read the considerations on the screen. Different considerations on the left and how they differ with teaching and facilitating. Once you're done comparing them, come back and we'll talk about a few more important skills that are important to educators. An important skill set that contributes to a successful educator includes facilitating learning as opposed to simply always delivering information, distinguishing from more traditional teaching in certain situations, and knowing when to use each methodology. The last slide wasn't a comprehensive list of all considerations. There's also other considerations like the problem focus, expected outcomes, the instructor position, authority, relativity. There are many other considerations that can help you decide if teaching or facilitating is better and what strategy to actually use to help achieve your learning goals. I want you to once again pause this video for a minute and read through the different considerations and compare and contrast teaching and facilitating. There are several questions you can ask yourself to help you determine if you should teach or facilitate. The first one is, what is your goal? Then the answer helps determine the method. For example, if your goal is to deliver information, you're going to teach. If your goal is to solve a problem, you're going to facilitate. If your goal is to discuss a common issue, you're going to facilitate. If your goal is to come to a mutual conclusion, you're going to facilitate. If your goal is to persuade participants to do something, you're going to teach. Or if your goal is to generate ideas, you're going to facilitate. The second question you can ask yourself is, what is the classroom configuration? Does the classroom configuration promote collaboration? If the space is formally arranged with seats facing the front and can't easily be configured, you're probably going to teach because you're going to be the central focus. But if the space is informally arranged in a circle or U-shape or can be easily reconfigured, you should probably facilitate and allow them to interact with each other one-on-one more. The third question you can ask yourself is, how long is the instruction? If it's a short amount of time, you're going to teach because there's not going to be a lot of extra time for collaboration. But if it's a long time or several relatively lengthy sessions in a series, it's okay to facilitate. You can also ask yourself, how well do participants know or trust each other? If they're strangers or have not established trust, you want to teach because you are the trusted individual in the room. But if participants know one another well or can quickly establish trust, you can facilitate. I think oftentimes in the corporate world, this comes down to company values and company culture. If collaboration is encouraged and it has an upbeat and positive company culture, you can quickly establish trust and people can gain perspectives from one another in the class. But if you are a college professor, let's say, you might not want to facilitate on day one of the semester because the class hasn't built trust. They don't know each other. It's the first day of school. But as the class goes on and they get through the semester, they're going to build more trust with one another, get more comfortable with you, get more comfortable with their peers, and you can begin incorporating more of those facilitation strategies in your class. You can also ask yourself, what's the nature of the content? If the topic is controversial or politically charged, you want to teach. But if the topic is not controversial or politically charged, you want to facilitate. And the last question you want to ask yourself is, what's the level of facilitator control? If you need to maintain tight control over the group in order for them to remain orderly and on track, you want to teach. You want to have that control. But if the group doesn't need to be tightly controlled to remain orderly and on track, you can facilitate. Let's go back to the 6 benefits of facilitated learning. One was giving the learners more responsibility, which comes with you needing to relinquish some of your control as the instructor. Don't worry, you don't need to remember everything we've covered today. I've created a performance support job aid to help guide you through these strategies the next time you design a course. Save this, print it so you have a copy on your desk, and use it whenever you need it. There are 2 key takeaways from today's short session. First, we can be more intentional with our methods of delivering instructional-led trainings and can better plan and strategize teaching or facilitating in our design. And this means early in our design. We can also consider the goals, objectives, and audience to help determine implementation strategy, and we can rely on asking ourselves the questions to help make that determination. If you have any questions about today's content, feel free to drop a question below and I will respond. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos and check out these references on the next slide if you're interested in learning more about this topic. Hopefully, I'll catch you again soon.